In the span of a single morning, the fate of the modern world hung by a thread. On June 6, 1944, over 150,000 men stepped into the freezing waters of Normandy, staring directly into the jaws of Hitler's fortress Europe. This single morning decided the fate of Europe for centuries. If it succeeded, Nazi Germany would be choked from two fronts. If it failed, the Allied war effort would be crushed, leaving the continent under total totalitarian darkness for a generation. But what history books don't explain is just how close this operation came to absolute disaster. Today, we reveal the real story behind D-Day, and the hidden mechanics of the largest amphibious invasion ever attempted. At this point in history, the Allied powers were desperate. For 4 agonizing years, Adolf Hitler had held continental Europe in a vice grip. While the Soviet Union was locked in a brutal, meat-grinder war of attrition on the Eastern Front, Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin demanded, pleaded, and begged for a second front in the West to relieve the pressure on his bleeding armies. The Western Allies stood on the brink of an ultimatum. This moment would reshape the balance of power forever. To take back the continent, they had to cross the treacherous English Channel and breach the Atlantic Wall. A terrifying, 3,000-mile network of concrete bunkers, landmines, millions of beach obstacles, and heavy artillery constructed by Nazi Germany. The strategic stakes could not have been higher. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, knew that a failure on the beaches of France would mean a catastrophe from which the Western Allies might never recover. The political tensions were palpable. It was a gamble of an unprecedented scale. To ensure the invasion's success, the Allies didn't just need raw firepower, they needed absolute deception. This led to Operation Fortitude, the greatest counterintelligence bluff in military history. The real story behind D-Day is that the battle was nearly won or lost before a single soldier even set foot on a boat. The Allies created an entire ghost army, commanded by the fearsome General George S. Patton, directly across from the French region of Pas-de-Calais. They leaked fake radio traffic, built massive dummy camps, and planted false double-agent reports. Berlin swallowed the bait completely. Hitler kept his most formidable panzer division stationed far away from Normandy, convinced that any movement there was merely a distraction. But nature nearly ruined the entire plan. In early June, the English Channel was battered by the worst summer storm in decades. Gale-force winds and torrential rain forced a terrifying delay. Eisenhower was trapped in an agonizing holding pattern. In his diary, British Chief of Staff Alan Brooke captured the suffocating anxiety. We are on the eve of the most giant gamble of this war. It may well be the most ghastly disaster, or it may be the most glorious success. The strain is almost unbearable. With thousands of men already cooped up inside seasick-inducing landing craft, tiny, precarious window of improved weather was spotted for June 6. Eisenhower paced the room, looked down, and made the fateful decision. He uttered 2 words that would alter human destiny: let's go. The invasion began in the dead of night, not from the sea, but from the heavens. Hours before the main fleet arrived, over 24,000 American, British, and Canadian paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines into the pitch-black darkness of Normandy. Chaos reigned. Scattered by heavy cloud cover and intense anti-aircraft fire, many paratroopers landed miles away from their target zones, drowning in flooded French marshes or being cut down in the dark. Yet, why did this happen to work to their advantage? This accidental dispersion terrified and thoroughly confused the German high command. Reports of Allied troops popped up everywhere simultaneously, completely paralyzing the German response. At 6:30, as the sun began to rise, the naval bombardment commenced. The heavy guns of Allied battleships shook the earth, paving the way for the ground assault across 5 distinct beachheads: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. While the British and Canadian forces at Gold, Juno, and Sword met moderate resistance and pushed inland, and the Americans at Utah secured their objectives with minimal casualties, Omaha Beach transformed into a slaughterhouse. At Omaha, everything went wrong. The preliminary aerial bombardment completely missed the German fortifications, dropping their payloads too far inland. The amphibious tanks, designed to provide crucial cover on the sand, sank like stones in the rough seas. As the ramps of the landing craft fell, the American 1st and 29th Infantry Division stepped directly into a crossfire of German milligram 42 machine guns, firing at an astonishing 1,200 rounds per minute. Soldiers were pinned down behind bloody obstacles, paralyzed by fear and the sheer volume of incoming fire. The tide was rushing in, threatening to drown the wounded. For the first few hours, Omaha Beach was a catastrophic, bloody stalemate. The turning point of D-Day did not come from a brilliant order from Supreme Headquarters. It came from the raw, desperate initiative of ordinary, nameless soldiers who realized that staying on that beach meant certain death. Brigadier General Norman Cotter famously rallied his pinned-down men on the sand, shouting through the gunfire, "Only two kinds of people are going to stay on this beach, those who are already dead and those who are gonna die. Now let's get the hell out of here." In a daring tactical move, Allied destroyers risked running aground, steaming into the shallow, treacherous waters just hundreds of yards off the coast. They fired their massive 5-inch guns directly into the concrete bunkers at point-blank range. Under this improvised, desperate naval cover, small groups of surviving infantry blew through the barbed wire using Bangalore torpedoes and began scaling the steep bluffs. By early afternoon, the heights of Omaha were taken. The psychological impact on the German defenders was devastating. They had fired millions of rounds, yet the Allied wave simply kept coming. The Atlantic Wall had been permanently breached. The consequences of June 6, 1944, were immediate and world-altering. By nightfall, the Allies had secured a tenuous but unbreakable foothold in France. But the human cost was staggering. Over 10,000 Allied soldiers were wounded, missing, or dead. More than 4,000 lay dead on the sands of Normandy on the very first day. Who truly won? The Allies achieved the impossible, but they paid for every single inch of ground in blood. Hitler's strategic nightmare had finally come to life. Nazi Germany was now hopelessly trapped in a vice between the advancing Soviet colossus in the east and the unstoppable Allied juggernaut in the west. From this day forward, Nazi defeat was no longer a question of if, but when. History would never be the same again. How this event changed history resonates into our world today. D-Day didn't just liberate France, it fundamentally drew the modern borders and geopolitical alliances of the Western world. It laid the foundation for the post-war democratic order, ensuring that Western Europe would develop under freedom rather than Soviet or totalitarian domination. People still search for this story today because it represents the absolute limit of human endurance, organization, and sacrifice. It is a timeless lesson that history quietly teaches us, that freedom is never free, and that the course of human destiny can be entirely rewritten by the courage of ordinary people in the span of a single, chaotic morning. The beaches were secure, but the bloody battle for the heart of Europe had only just begun. If you want more deep dive history like this, like the video and subscribe to the channel. To discover what happened next, click on the video on your screen right now to watch our full breakdown of the brutal Battle of the Hedgerows, and see how the Allies fought their way out of the Normandy trap. See you there.